Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Art 192, Photoshop for the fall 2021 semester. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of Photoshop, and to do so, I will do lesson one. And it covers a few of the basic features for which Photoshop was intended. It was in 1990, when it was developed, it was basically developed as a retouching tool. And over the years, it's gotten to be a whole bunch more than that. You can do one-sheets, ads, you can animate, you can edit video, you can do a whole bunch of things. You can do digital paintings in Photoshop. Some things it does superbly, some things that there are other programs that do a little bit better. Sometimes a lot better. But if they're also made by Adobe, if you have a subscription to Adobe, you will have access to those programs as well. So to get started, I hope everybody can see this clearly. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger, provided my computer doesn't crash. I got a lot of things going on here, so I'll make sure that all is good. Okay, so on the screen here, I have both the start and the end file that we'll be working on. It's a pretty simple exercise, but again, it's the goal is to get you acclimated to Photoshop. So let's start at the top. And at the top, what I have done, if we look all the way to the right, it's this little tab right here that lets me decide what kind of workspace I want to view. So if you want to follow along with me, I have Essentials selected. And if your Essentials looks a little bit different, then what you should do is come down here and to reset Essentials so that we're all on the same page. So that's what a few of these do. This is probably the most important one here. Choose a type of workspace. This one is for users who are working on Teams and working in the cloud. You can invite people to edit if you wish. If you want to go ahead and search for tools or help and that sort of thing, that's where that button is, the little magnifying glass. And then the last one up here to the right, you'll see that little pop-up things is that if you want to share an image, and that would be in your shared library. We don't cover most of the cloud options, although that's one of the things that Photoshop or Adobe in general has developed over the years when they went to a subscription base and put everything on the cloud and linked everything together. Whereas before they were purchased as individual applications that you kept on your personal computer. Let's jump over to the left here. This is where you will find all of your tools. We have our basic move tool here. You'll notice as I hover over some of them, I have the little, you can turn this off if you want under preferences, but what it does is it gives you a preview of what this tool does. These are the Marquee Tools. If you notice a little tick mark in the lower right-hand corner of a tool, then that means that there are other options, other variations, other tools buried underneath there. So we will be going through all of these throughout the semester. So that's where all of your tools are found. Along the top is that you have, I call it an options menu along here. So anytime you have a tool selected, for example, if I have the type tool down here selected, notice that what this does is that it changes and it gives you additional functionality or options available for that particular tool. Now, just like Illustrator and other programs that are developed by Adobe, there's a lot of redundancy built in because what you see up here now is also in the properties panel. And what this should be one of the default panels here under essentials. We have properties. Another important one that we will be using are the adjustment layers. We use those a lot. If you have shared libraries, notice that I don't have anything here at the moment, that's where you will put those. So if there's items that you use frequently, you can put them there, or maybe I do and it's trying to retrieve them. It's a little sluggish right now. I don't use it. I don't put anything on their server. So let's go back to the properties panel. And again, you can see just as I selected up here, the type tool, and it gave me options for it. The same things are over here. I can transform from here. It gives me a character analysis of it. I'm using Minion Pro. It's italic. It gives me the point size and the leading and that sort of thing. It's the same thing that's found up here. Properties panels, or all of these panels over here, can be extremely helpful. You see at the top that we have our color management, we have swatches, you have gradients, and we have patterns, and there's a bunch more. If you don't see the panel that you're looking for to the right, it will be found under the Windows menu up at the top. So from time to time, you'll have to click on here. Oh, come on. See now my computer is getting sluggish. That's when it starts to do that. I hate that. I hate it. So if you see one that's checked, that means that it's visible. If it's not checked, then if you want to see channels, for example, or want to see brushes, then I click here and then the brush panel opens up. And if you want to close it, and just click on this little tab here. Okay. Now, another important panel that we'll be using frequently are layers. They are it's one of the most important panels that you will use in here. Layers allow you to, just like an Illustrator, allow you to divide your piece, the piece that you're working on, into multiple sections, just that layered on top of one another like a stack of paper. Anything at the bottom of the stack will be down here. Anything at the top of the stack will be up here at the very top, and anything in between. Okay. And then you'll see for each of the panels, there'll be some buttons at the bottom that give you functionality to that. If you want to link layers together, if I want to add a layer effect, if I want to add a layer mask, if I want to create a new adjustment layer. And again, that's a holdover from the past because we can add an adjustment layer from there or from here. It really doesn't matter. But you will see the more familiar you become with Photoshop, that there's a lot of the same thing here, there, and everywhere. That depending on what you're doing and your workflow and your style of working, your habits, it will determine what which one you'll choose. Okay. So what I've done here, if another ancillary program that you might consider using from time to time, and we will cover this in future lessons, is found up here under the File menu, and it is Browse and Bridge. Bridge is an ancillary program that works with all of the Adobe software, and it serves as sort of a library, a hub of where you put and name your files and things like that. And it allows you to look at them and save them and open them quite easily and rank them, especially if you're a photographer and you have a lot of different files that you need to organize. So it will give you, especially if you're using digital files, a lot of metadata that's available with those files. And you can see that my computer is kind of slowing down here. So hopefully it opens up quickly. This is it down here, Bridge. Come on. Open up, open up, open up, open up. It's not opening. It's here. It says it's open. So it's been unruly here today. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't clear the cache or something from previous class. Well, I'm going to go ahead and continue with this. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to close the start file just to show you what we can do here. So here's the end file. We have this nice picture of a rose, and it's turned into a happy birthday card. To open files, I prefer using Bridge, but what we can do is go to File, come on, and I can select Open. My preference is Browse in Bridge, but Bridge isn't opening at the moment. I'm not sure why. And it's taken a minute. This should go very quickly for you. But I think because I have other things going on here, and I'm also trying to broadcast what I'm doing, that it's slowing my computer down. Now, some days that happens and sometimes it doesn't. So anyway, what I want to do is I want to select the start file. And I'll select that as I have my lessons located on my desktop. You can put yours wherever you like. Remember, you can find the collection of lessons, the before and after files, in our shared Google Drive folder. So I'm going to go ahead and open the beginning file, start file. And by default, it opens each of the individual files in tabs. And you can click on one and click on another to jump back and forth between the two. But when I opened up and started recording today, I had both of them there. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm demonstrating these lessons is I like to go to Window and select Arrange. And under Arrange, what I'm going to select is I want to look at 2 up vertically. And by doing that, I can take those 2 files and I can see them side by side. Right? I prefer that. Let's get this out of the way. Okay. So let's walk through this and see some of the common things that we do in here. We're going to start and make sure that we have to get this end result. The first thing that we want to do is we want to dress up the photo a little bit. It is clearly underexposed. But if it's a digital photograph, there's a good chance that there's a lot of metadata in there to allow us to brighten it up. And there are a variety of ways to do that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the adjustment layers to do that. You'll also notice in the layers panel that there is another layer here titled Ribbons. If I turn that on, that they've already done the little happy birthday thing for us. And you can turn layers on and off by doing that. That's one of the things that's kind of nice. What makes Photoshop layers different than Illustrator layers, for those of you who have worked with Illustrator, is that when you turn a layer off and you go to print it or save it, it will not, well, let's go to printing. It will not print that layer that you've turned off. That's not true in Illustrator. In Illustrator, you need to specify if you want a layer to not print. Here, if it's turned off, it will print. If it is turned on, it will print. So just to let you know that for those of you who have experience using Illustrator. So what I'm going to do is with the, and this is not in the textbook, but it's a habit that I like to practice. And I would prefer that you do that so that I can see your original files and then see what you've done on top of it. Is that number one, I tried to never work on my original file. I always make a copy of the layer first. So to do that, I can click on this layer named Rose, and I'm going to drag it on the new layer button down here. And what that does is it makes a copy of it. I can turn off the layer down that's beneath it. And so if I screw up and I need to get back to where I started, I can always turn this layer off and turn this one back on, and without too much muss or fuss, continue where I left off rather than to have to start over again. So that's something that I like to do. So the next step here is that we want to, since the photograph is really kind of dark, one of the things that are very common here is to use adjustment layers to brighten it up. There's about 3 different ones that are pretty common. The first one that they recommend to use in the book is brightness contrast. There's also levels, and there's also curves. These are the 3 that do that most often. So let's start with what they have, and let's try a couple of others. Adjustment layers are non-destructible, or non-destructive, I should say, is that they, as soon as I clicked on that, notice that it added an adjustment layer above the one that I just had. They always are added above the existing layer. Something to note, though, is that adjustment layers by default affect every layer beneath it. And there is a way that we can target a specific layer beneath it, but if you're not careful and you forget about it, it will affect every layer beneath it. So what we can do now, it hasn't done anything yet. The brightness and contrast are set to the default 0. I like starting mine by just clicking auto and seeing what it does. It goes through its motions, it should go very quickly. And again, my computer is kind of sluggish. And let's see how, if it dresses it up a little bit, and it should give us a pretty decent result when we're done. And then we can make further adjustments to it if we wish. And you can see it looks pretty decent just by the default settings here. But if you want to really crank up the brightness, you can, to see what it does, and it blows out a good part of the color, especially in the rows. Okay. If you want to add contrast, you can do that. So for aesthetic reasons, you know, if you're working on an illustration, on a poster, on something, a project of your own, where you really want to be a little bit more creative, and don't go by a quote realistic approach, then you can always do that. Now, what I can also do is I can always reset this by clicking this button back here, and it goes back to the default settings here. I can also go back to auto, and I'm satisfied with that for the time being. I believe the book wants us to make further adjustments, but I'm just going to leave it at that for the moment. Okay. So we have that. That looks pretty decent, but I think we can do better. So another thing that we can do is I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. Wrong layer. Sorry, wrong. Let's go back here. I think I had the wrong image selected. Let me go back again. Yeah, I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to turn this one off. Go back and make sure that I have the rose copy selected. And under adjustment layers, I'm going to try a different one. I'm going to use levels this time. And when I do, you'll see that it has a histogram of the photograph here. And what this graph indicates is the range of lights and darks. And we can see that if I pull this down a little bit, so we can see the whole range, all the output levels, that it goes from a mid-tone to dark, and there aren't really any highlights in here. So again, what I might want to do is, as soon as I clicked on levels, notice that it added a layer for it immediately above. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click auto again and see what results I get, and see if they're any different than the other one. And it is a little bit different. The pinks and the violets in the back aren't as intense, but you can see that it created an interesting range. What I can do is, if I want to brighten this up, notice is that I move the little target to the right, it really brightens it. If I want to adjust it a little bit, I can do that. If I want to change the degree of lights and darks, I can do that. If I want to change my midpoint, I can do that. And again, if I want to go back to auto, it will just automatically go back and reset. So far, I think if I turn that off and I turn this one back on, brightness contrast has the best result. But I think probably the best one that I'm going to get is going to be the one with curves. It has the most to select from. So I'm going to select curves. And I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time. You may notice on some of these, they have these little eyedroppers here. Well, what I want to do is I want to find the lightest light and the darkest dark in my photograph. And I'll use that as a guide for myself. So let's start with the darkest one here, the dark point. And I'll just click back here. And that's the darkest point. So that darkens that area. Now I want to find the lightest point, and that's probably, we can click a few different places here. Now that really brightens it up. If I click here, that might darken it a little bit. And if I click here, so you try to find the areas of your image that are the lightest areas. And if you want to, tweak it, you can. And if you find that it gets a little bit unruly, reset it, go back to auto settings, give it a try, see what you get. And it looks pretty good. I like a little bit brighter. So I'm going to take the light. Let's take the dark again. I'll take the light and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find, I think probably right in here, to brighten it up just a little bit. That's a little bit too much, but that's okay. And then I'm going to take the dark and I'm going to darken it. And I'm going to find the darkest dark back here. And so the version that I have here is even a little bit more intense and a little bit more vibrant than the one that they have. It's taste. It's up to you. You know what you feel looks best for you, or what your client feels is best. Next, what we want to do is, I'm not going to add type yet, but what I want to do is I want to add this little, let's turn on the little band, the ribbon that they have here. Okay. I want to create my own little ribbon down here. Now, the way that they say that we should do it, and I don't like doing it this way, is by using one of our selection tools. Okay, so I can use the polygonal lasso tool, but I'm going to go ahead, and if you want to do this the way the book does it, be my guest. Because how it wants us to do it is that we're going to, for example, we're going to click, and I'm going to drag, and I'm going to hold down the shift key to constrain the direction of this. And I'll click, and then I'm going to come down here and at about a 45-degree angle, not quite. If I hold down the shift key, it will constrain it to 45 degrees. And I'll click, move it down. Then I'm going to go ahead and again continue to hold down the shift key. And it will be, again, constrained at a 45-degree angle. And I'll click again. And then I'm going to move over here and click and then double click. And it will, what it does is it ends in what I call the marching ants. So this is a selection, but what you have to be careful of is that if I go ahead, and this is where you can work in a non-destructive way, or a destructive way. And so what I want to do is, let's go ahead and fill it with a color. I'm going to fill it with a default black, just to show you what happens. And if I hit Option, let me make sure that I have the right layer selected. That would be helpful. And make sure that I have that layer. And if I hit Option, Delete, that fills it with the default foreground color, which is white. If I want to pick another color, I can pick it from here and do the same thing, Option, Delete, and it fills it with a foreground color. If I want to match a color that I have in my illustration or my photograph, I can click on the foreground color and I can move over here and I can click to find something in the ballpark of what's here. That's a little bit too light, want a little bit darker. I can see where the new color is here. So let's click again. A little bit darker yet. Here, I'll just go with that one just for the heck of it. Click OK, and then I can go ahead and I can hit Option, delete, and it will fill it with that color. And that one is pretty close. But you'll notice that the size of mine is a little bit different. I'm going to leave it for a moment, and to get rid of those marching ants, I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. Now, if I decide, oh shoot, I want to move that, and I also goofed, it doesn't look quite right. It's the wrong size, it's the wrong color and everything. Notice that it's on the rose copy layer. And this is where I'm using layers, but I use them incorrectly. So if I come back and I come back here, and let's say I go back and I use my quick selection tool or the magic wand, and I come in here and I select this, and I'm thinking, okay, now I can move it. So let me go ahead and move it. So I'm going to go ahead and select the move tool, and I'm going to go ahead and move it. And let's see what happens here. Oh, wow. Look what happens. It cut away. And then behind this image, there is nothing. So that's what happens when you use one layer. You have to be very careful. That's why using multiple layers in Photoshop is so critical. So I'm going to undo a couple of steps. I have that option for myself. So I can go back, and I can go back and back until I go back to my original image, deselect. And now I have several undos that are available to me. So what I would prefer to use instead, that makes more sense to me, is that if I use one of these tools down here, these are the rectangle tools. These are tools that are normally the kinds of tools that you find in Illustrator. They're vector. So I'm going to select a rectangle tool, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click and drag to make my rectangle. And let's see if I can get something that's about the right size here. Okay. And it's filled with that color, and I'm good to go. So it's a nice rectangle, but I need to get that little chiseled piece in here. So how I do that is that if I use the tools up here that I normally use for a pen tool, and again, this is not in the textbook. So what I would do is I would add an anchor point here. So I'm going to add an anchor point, and I'm going to click right here. And now I can use my direct selection tool. Okay, so the direct selection tool is hidden underneath the selection tool here. It's a different kind of selection tool. And I can click on this, and I can pull it to the side and hold down the Shift key. But you'll notice that the points are curved. Well, I don't want that. So what I need to do now, but you can see that this is taking a bit longer, but it's way more accurate. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and underneath the pen tool here, I'm going to use the Convert Anchor Point tool, and I'm going to click on there, and I'm going to change it from a curved to a corner point. And now I can go ahead and go back to my selection tool and deselect, and I've got my little little banner here. Now, if I want to change the color for any reason, because you can see over in the layers panel, what it's done is it's named something called rectangle. So if I want to change the color of it, I simply double click on it. And if I want to, I can pull the color from here and click OK. And it should update it. So hopefully it will update it. And it didn't. So let me try again. I'm going to double click. I'll go over to this image. Let's make it a little bit darker. I want to find something good and dark. Oh, this, you know why it's doing this? See, I'm forgetting things. Remember I told you that curves would affect everything beneath it. Well, that's what it's doing. It's affecting everything beneath it. So what I want to do is either put the rectangle above all of these, And now you can see it's much darker. The brightness and contrast was affecting that, and I just wasn't thinking. Another way to do that we'll cover in another day is I could have targeted that specific layer. But I'll go back and I'll double click again. And again, I'm going to find, let's see if I can find something from here. If I can't, find something here. Get something that's close. Close enough for government work. That's just fine. Okay. So I need to make a couple of little corrections in here, but I'll do that a little bit later. So that's how I would go ahead. I would make that little banner here. And notice that when you use the any one of these tools here that are vector tools, they automatically create their own layer. Similar to that is when we use the type tool. It doesn't matter where we click. What will happen is that we'll automatically create its own layer. So what I'm doing, I want to get the same yellow is that what I have in the happy birthday here. So when I click on that, you'll notice that it changed up here. If I switch to properties, let's go back to type again. And as soon as I click, I'll just click here. Okay. Notice that the color has changed here, it's changed up here, and it's changed over here to the left. I want to make sure I don't want it transform. I'm going to go ahead and write the word Elaine, E-L-A-I-N-E. I'm going to look at the size. The book specifies 32 point. It wants us to use Minion Pro italic. So when I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and I can click the checkbox at the top, or I can go back and I can select the move tool. And now I can click with the move tool and I can move this wherever I want. Now I have that there. Now, if I zoom in a little bit on this, I can see that I have these little rounded corners. Why I did that, I don't know. So I'm going to go back to my selection tool. I'm going to select this, not the direct selection tool. I'm going to select path. Make sure that the rectangle is selected here. And I want to get rid of that. So maybe what I need to do is I need to remove points. So with these tools, it's always easy to do that. I can go ahead and I can remove a point, or I can, why it did that, maybe the tool that I was using, it automatically made a rounded point. Well, let's give this a try, and then we'll be pretty close to calling it a day. But I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent here. But one of the things that we can do is, let me go ahead and I'm going to take, and I'm going to select again with the selection tool, the direct selection tool, to select an individual point. So what I want to do is I want to select this point and I want to get rid of it. So I'm going to select here under the pen tool, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, just as I added a point, I'm going to delete a point. So that gets rid of that. And then I need to get rid of this one. And notice that I've got rid of those, but it's still rounded. So I need to change this to a corner point. It's confusing, doesn't it? So if you, for those of you who have Illustrator background, not too much of a problem. Now I use the convert point tool, change that, and I'm set to go. If I use the direct selection tool, I can come back here and I can move this wherever I want. And now that I'm happy with it, I'll go ahead and go back, deselect, and zoom out. So we've really pretty much done the lesson. There's a couple more things that I want to cover though, because, and that's to make a distinction between Photoshop, which is a bitmap or raster program, and a program like Illustrator, which is a vector or object-oriented program. In this particular program, Photoshop, the resolution of your image is really critical. And what I mean by resolution is how many pixels per inch are you using? There are a couple of ways that you can find that here. I can come up here and you can see right here in the bottom left-hand corner, it gives me the physical size of this. It's almost 5 by 7, which is a postcard size. And we can see that it's 200 pixels per inch, 200 ppi. That's really the minimum number of pixels that you should use for a printed image. Ideally, you should be using about 300. So in order to come back in here and see another way of that is what you would do is you would go to the top menu here and go to image size. Come on. It's doing this when it's slow on memory. Image size. And a little panel or dialog box will pop up. And again, it duplicates what you see down here. So the width is 4.9 inches, the height is 6.86, and the resolution is 200. Well, let's say I wanted to change that to 300 pixels per inch because I said that that was ideal. If I have the height and the width and length and resolution linked to one another, this is kind of old school, is that if I were to type in 300 now, notice that the size of the postcard shrinks so that there's no degradation in the quality of the image. If I hold down the Option key and I reset this, I can go back to what I had a moment ago. And instead, what we can do is we can resample this. They've made significant improvements over the years. This in the past would have been an absolute no-no. But if I were to go ahead and increase the size or increase the resolution now, what this will do is preserve details in the enlargement and it will reduce the noise. Now, how much you can do this, the only way you can really determine if you kind of gone over what you should have done or kind of gone over the edge is to come back and to actually print both of them and compare. There we go. Bring that back up here. So let me try. See, now I can go ahead and I can change this to 300 pixels per inch. And we can see zoomed in if there are any details that are lost. And this is at 100%. It's a little blurry. If I zoom out a little bit, see this? It's not too much, not too different. It might hold up just fine. So both of these to determine the resolution of your image, especially if you get images off the internet, will be very important. But in this class, you will work at a minimum of 200 pixels per inch and ideally 300 pixels per inch. To see the difference between the two, what I have done in the past and I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to Adobe Illustrator. And I'm going to show you, make a comparison between bitmap and vector to show you the difference. And Illustrator does a great job of that. So it's going to take a second or two to launch this. So what I may have to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause. So Illustrator is crashing on me. I will have to show you on another day. But the point that I wanted to make is to show you and make a compare and contrast Photoshop with Illustrator. And it's easiest to do that in Illustrator as opposed to Photoshop. Well, I mean, we could do it in Photoshop, but it's not as easy to do. So I will do that on another day. In the meantime, let me go ahead and kind of close things out here. And I'm going to go ahead and pause again, and before you guys leave, I'm going to continue to take roll. And then we'll call it a day, unless you guys have any questions. And I'd be happy to stay here and answer questions for you if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. Yeah, my computer is just it doesn't like something here today. So Zoom isn't responding now. Neither is Photoshop. So I'm going to select Photoshop. This might be an Adobe issue. Now Zoom is responding okay. I'll just force quit. There we go. Resume recording.
Recording in progress.
So we go back to my Google Drive. You can see all the shared folders that I have on here. And there's one specifically for this class. Okay, actually there's two. There is Art 192 for depending on what section you're in, and another Art 192. So if you're in the 20083 section, I have one here. I also have one here for the 27032 section. But either one, if I double click on them, for those of you who have emailed me, you will see that I have added you to this shared Google Drive folder. And what you need to look at is right here where it says PSCC 2020 lesson files. This is where you will find these. This is the location where you will find the files. So if I double click on this now, and again, everything is running at a snail's pace. Yeah, I'm sure that Google Drive is pulling share of. There we go. Just everything is running. You'll see that here are all the lessons. So if we go to lesson, well, I guess it's technically lesson 2, not lesson 1. My apologies. But if you double click on it, and if I do need to put it back up, I will. Maybe I screwed up. No, I can do that shortly. Come on. Open up. Yeah, this is causing some fits. Nope, I goofed. It's not here. So somebody, maybe me, removed it. So I will add this back in here, but this is where you will find all of the files. So as soon as we get off today, I will put it back up. I'll take one from my computer and I'll put it inside here into one of these folders. So it should be, yeah, lesson 1 is missing. Okie doke, well, I will fix it. I will stop sharing now. And I'm going to say goodbye to all of you. Okay, so you're free to leave. Okay, and I will stop the recording.